Hello everybody, it's White to play in this position. So while I introduce today's episode, please take a step back and try to find a good move for White. Folks, let's talk about time management when it comes to calculation. In other words, when do we know or how do we know when to stop calculating lines in chess? That's a very common problem I witness as a chess coach. Many beginners, many players, they spend way too much time in irrelevant lines that are a very low chance of occurrence. They don't know where to stop their lines and play their moves. This leads to time trouble. This leads to inefficiency of practical game situations. So the game plan for this video is this. I will show you around 6 positions that are touching on different themes of calculation. And I will give you my advice on when is the right time to stop. And then we can discuss. You can, by the way, while you're looking at these examples, you can ask yourself, how would you treat those positions? Are you looking at some irrelevant lines that is not seen by me? Or are you stopping too early or too late? And while we also do that, I will give you some nice hints and tips of good calculation practice, folks. Let's start with this position. I'm sure you saw this knight as a bad piece right now because of the pawn on c6, but this piece has potential to activate and awaken. And you're a great player if you found the nice mini plan b5 to undermine that pawn, thus awaken your knight on this d5 square. Can you see the nice mini plan here, folks? This bishop sucks, obviously, that's a terrible piece, and your knight can improve significantly on this d5 square. So we go b5, of course, in this position, and after takes, we are ready to jump to d5. And if black goes c5, then again, we can jump to d5 directly in this position. In both options, you really don't need to calculate far ahead, right? Before you play b5, you don't need to, visualize all the consequences of this. What if they do this? Then what do I do? For all practical purposes, you can just play b5 without necessarily calculating all the ramifications after, let's say, queen d8 in this position, right? Because you know already when you go b5 that your knight will become a happy camper on d5 and you will take it from there, right? Logically, that's a quiet calculation, by the way. Yeah, b5 is a quiet calculation. You're setting your goal properly. Your goal is to activate your knight. That's your mini plan, and b5 gives you that. You don't need to see all the ramifications after, let's say, takes. What if black does something here? You know that on the next move, your knight is jumping to d5. Obviously, you should always stop your calculations with the blunder check process. You should always look at the opponent's forcing replies against your moves. More on that later on. Let's do it together. b5, takes. Obviously, you should make sure, for example, that your knight is not hanging in this position, correct? Obviously. But as long as you check for safety, you don't need to calculate 10 moves ahead from this position. Use your common sense, right? Because you achieved your mini plan. Your knight will be a hero on d5, and you will take it from there. It's black to play here, folks. And again, I want you to create a nice mini plan for black here. How would you play this position with the black pieces? Please orient yourself to the situation. It's a positional puzzle. It's a quiet calculation, short calculation. Let's do it together, folks. Black has 2 versus 1 on the queen side. So black's goal should be to create a passed pawn on the queen side, correct? Logically, use your logic, right? The idea is to create a passed pawn. How do you do that? That's the question. And here comes a little positional pattern to remember. We first go c3, folks. It's a beautiful move. And if white takes on c3, then we go b3. And our queen is supporting our pawn. We created a passed pawn on b3. That's a very advanced passed pawn. That's a great advantage in itself. And here already, for all practical purposes, calculation can stop here, right? Obviously, you should still check for blunders. Does white have any check? No, white is nothing. And already you can understand that this queen has to tie down. It should be tied down to stop your pawn on b3. But for all practical purposes, you reach your goal. Then we can look at some lines, for example. Queen f5, you see my point, yeah? We push the pawn and look at this queen, right? Just look at the difference between those two queens. That's what this passed pawn gives you, right? And this could be anticipated from the moment you generated that pawn as well, right? Here, black has many winning moves. You don't need to see this winning line from the first position. For example, you can stop video, folks, and find the most direct finish for black. It's 3-ply calculation. Please stop the video and find it for black, guys. You're a great player. If you found the forcing move, queen a7 check, followed by, you tell me, queen a1, and we use our beautiful pass pawn to win the game directly. White has no defense. But for all practical purposes, you don't need to calculate until that position from here, right? Just use your common sense. Obviously, by going c3, we are creating a pass pawn. And if white does this, I've seen many players in this position tell me, but what if they go b3, right? They try to calculate. Even here, they try to calculate further, and they couldn't see anything directly for black. And then I told them, hey, you look at what you got. Look what you got, my friend. You reached your goal. You just created a protected passed pawn on c3. So why do you worry about what to do in this position and waste your precious time, right? It's a beautiful mistake because many players, folks, here, after they imagine white will go b3, they would keep on calculating in a position like this. But if they just take a step back, ask themselves, what was my goal from initial position? Well, it was to generate a passed pawn, and you reached it, and here you will take it from here, right? That's a mini plan. You're one step closer to your goal, but you don't need to calculate until checkmate from that position. Can you understand the beauty of this, folks? I witnessed many times as a coach this kind of mistake. And here, obviously, black has several ways to win this position, and I just take it from here, right? I don't need to see everything from the initial position. Now we've seen quiet calculation and the goal setting process. Now let's discuss the method of elimination here, folks. It's black to play. What should black do, folks? Please stop the video and think for yourself first. Remember the most important question in chess? It's, what will my opponent do if I don't make a move right now? And I'm pretty sure you saw the mate threat, rook h8, right? That's a huge threat you're facing right now. It looks like black king is busted, but there's only a single move that keeps the black king alive. And I'm sure you found it, guys. King f8, right? That's the only move to escape against the mate. Now if they check us, our king will escape on a7 towards the queen side, correct? So for all intents and purposes, you should play king f8 quickly, right? Because that's the only option. Now you're using the method of elimination, which is a great time saver because you don't need to calculate what happens after moves like rook h7. Rook h7 is the best move for white, but black should not spend any time calculating rook h7 in this position, right? Black has only a single move, which must be played instantly, right? So again, I've seen many players across the years that they only have a single move and they keep worrying about white's next move against that move, right? Common sense, use your logic. That makes zero sense for you to waste any time in your clock in calculating what would white do in this position after your forced move king f8. Now, I will show you another position, folks, which I found very instructive, that I found people go wrong, they waste their precious time. Black to play here, folks. I want you to find a short and sweet and cute finish for black in this position. How would you play with black and force a resignation, basically? It's a game of yes or Servan with the black pieces, folks, and you're a great player if you found the move rook takes f1. This rook is pinned, this bishop is pinned, so there's only a single response. King takes f1, and what's our next move? Bam! Queen h1, a beautiful mate, and black wins. I witnessed some players that told me that yes, they saw rook takes f1 here, but then they couldn't see a finish after king d2, right? So they were wasting their precious time trying to anticipate their next move against king d2. But it's irrelevant, right? Use your common sense. First of all, you're winning one full piece in this position, right? So it's not your task to force yourself to find a great finish after king d2. At the very least, you will have an extra knight in this position. Plus, you can also win this rook for free, right? That's a human solution. Rook takes f2 and the game is over. Apparently, there's also mate, forced mate in this position. Queen g5, rook f4, takes, king d3, and queen e3 mate. But it's not black's responsibility, right, to find that mate before capturing on f1. That's totally irrelevant. That's against common sense. The key line for us to calculate is this. What if the king just takes our rook? What if they get the extra material, right? Then we must really have a great response against that. And that's just mate on the next move. If you force yourself, if you try to calculate deeper, longer, then you also like start to question yourself and things can go really terribly wrong. So again, practically, it makes zero sense for us to calculate the consequences after the suboptimal move, king d2, which is losing to almost every single move by black. Now, let's discuss a very important process in calculation. Candidate move generation, folks. It's black to play here, folks. White has just forked our pieces. The question is, what should black do? Is there a way to get an advantageous position from this position, folks? It seems like white is also weakening their king by pushing g4. Can we exploit that? Think for yourself first. Then I will give you the first prompts, okay? Secret of calculation, one of the biggest secrets, is to give yourself choices on the very first move. Generate several candidate moves that look reasonable, because then you know that you have choices, right? You know that you're reasonable choices. So if one candidate turns out to be too complex, too difficult, you can't calculate all the consequences, then you know that you have choices on the very first move. Then you can take a step back and just ask yourself whether one of the other candidates are giving you much faster solution. And that's a great time saver, folks. That is great practical significance. Let's generate candidates here for black, guys. Most of you, I'm sure, have seen the move knight f4 here. I'm sure that move came to you most of your minds. And you could spend the entire time in your clock calculating the consequences of this. Let's look at this first. Yeah, knight f4. G takes f5. We lost a piece. Then we take on h3, right? And then maybe some of you found the move rook takes f5 initial position. We lose a knight. We are down two pieces. But look at the white king. Then maybe some of you look further and noticed queen e6. Then you force king g2. Then comes queen g6 check. Then king h1. Then rook h5 check. Then knight h2. And then queen h6. And most of you may have even calculated all the way here, folks. The problem is that the line is too long and white can, first of all, even sacrifice the queen, right? Even sacrifice the queen here and get an equal position. That's an equality for white. But also, right, they can just go queen f3 and stop the mate on the next move, and the game goes on. Then you can calculate even longer. Rook f8, queen c6. Then you do this, knight e2, check, knight g2. Look at the line. Look how complex the entire line is. It's too deep, too long, too complex. And we only have equality in the end. Just look at this. The entire line is just 15 moves deep, folks, from the initial position. We went directly through the rabbit hole without asking ourselves whether we had alternatives on the very first move. So this is the secret. In this position, we have to generate candidates first. One candidate move, as we discussed, is knight f4. Can you tell me the second reasonable candidate here for black? Black has so many good-looking moves here. You're a great player, folks. If you notice a simple retreat, bishop g6, and you say, please take my knight, please. Takes. And look what happened, right? Look at our bishop. Just pins the knight on f3, and we'll be regaining the piece with interest on the next move. We play like Magnus Carlsen. We attack without sacrificing, right? We did not even sacrifice anything because we'll get the piece back with interest. Black has a completely winning position because of the king safety difference, because of our beautiful pieces on the king side. And this line, right, is not complex like the knight f4 line. It's simple, beautiful, short calculation. I love this position, folks. Please understand the main point of it. What we learn from this example is that in any position that requires calculation, we have to generate more candidate moves instead of choosing one good-looking option and just enter the rabbit hole like there is no tomorrow. I've seen many times as a coach that is one of the biggest calculation mistakes. People don't give themselves choices on the very first move. They fell in love with an idea and they go like 25 moves in depth in that line. The problem is, right, long variation is wrong variation in chess. Something will go wrong in your visualizations. You'll miss the opponent's resources at some point. And then again, right, you see, once you know that you have alternatives here, right? Back to my first point. Once you know your alternatives from the initial position, the moment it gets too murky, you will take a step back. Imagine you look at this move, right? It gets murky. You can't see a direct solution. Then you just take a step back, right? Go back and ask yourself whether there's a stronger alternative. And there is. Bishop g6, and the game is over. Let's talk about another fundamental calculation process, guys. Calculation should always end with a blunder check. You should always stop your lines and your calculations with the opponent's move, right? You have to look at the opponent's forcing replies against your move. That's how you should finish your calculations, because then, right, you expose yourself to the blunders otherwise. Yeah, imagine this position is black to move. That's a great exercise, guys. Black to move. First of all, I want you to list your candidate moves, right? It looks like black can win a pawn on f4, right? Because the pawn is pinned on g3. You see it. So my candidate is this. Bishop takes f4 is a candidate. Queen takes f4 is a candidate. And maybe h4 is also a candidate for black in this position, correct? Now we have choices. If I ask you, for example, this question, can you please blunder check the move bishop takes f4? Can you please do it? Because that's exactly what my student did in the actual game. This has great practical significance, guys, because he only saw bishop takes f4. He thought he was winning because that's a great move. The bishop cannot be captured, and I will capture on g3 on the next move, crush through your position, and the game is over. And that's exactly where he failed. He stopped his calculations too early. He did not check for all the forcing moves by the opponent against bishop takes f4. And please, folks, can you tell me which move does white have in this position that refutes our concept? Yes, rook f1. Suddenly, by capturing on f4, black has opened the f-file and white starts piling up against the queen on f5. And if we take on g3, right, you see where it's going basically. Just takes, and it's white who ended up with an extra rook in this position with a completely winning position. Going back, bishop takes f4 looks beautiful, but that's exactly where you can go wrong. You should be like a scientist. You should seek for counter evidence from the world before you play your winning looking continuation. Yeah, that's exactly how strong players play. They are like scientists. They always check for such blunders. And the way to do it, as I mentioned, is that you look at the opponent's forcing replies against your move that is about to be played. It's a beautiful example because it's only one move ahead. Yeah, it's just not a long line. It's just a very single move from black and a single response by white. And the whole thing is refuted basically for black. Yeah, that's beautiful because white's really is winning. There's no counterplay. The bishop is pinned. Everything is just hanging for black. Obviously, you see also the importance of candidate moves here, right? Once black knew that he had choices, you understand. Queen takes f4 is much better, right? Because if the queen takes back, extra pawn, black is a beautiful endgame. The knight sucks, the rooks are terrible. Black wins. Also the same with h4, right? I destroy the entire pawn chain. After g4, I can take on f4, again with a winning endgame for black with an extra pawn. And I will leave you guys with this homework position. It's black to play here. You're facing an enormous threat of queen d8 check. First things first. The first question is this. Have you noticed a good-looking candidate here for black? Please stop the video. Let's do it together first. I will prompt you a little bit in this position. It looks like black is a beautiful-looking tactical resource that you can find in some puzzle rush and so on. Yeah, it's a beautiful combination, basically, for black. And the question is obviously whether it's working or not, right? You will use your knight's ability to create chaos on the board. But the question is it working for black or not? I want you to, first of all, discover that tactical resource for black here, and then tell me, write to me on YouTube, what you're seeing. Should we calculate that line in depth? And when exactly should we stop? And that's my question, right? Are you stopping too early, perhaps? And that's my little final prompt for you to maybe help you with this position, folks. I hope you like this video. The lessons are important. First things first, when it comes to quiet positional calculations, goal setting is very important. We should evaluate the resulting position. Positionally speaking, we should be happy to reach our goals instead of just trying to go deeper, and waste our time with irrelevant lines. Okay? Mini plans, short mini plans are how masters treat those positions. And again, as we saw the second position, for example, that sometimes we just look at irrelevant lines. One line we are just winning in mate in 2, the other line we are at least with a piece up, right? It doesn't make any sense that you waste your time in finding all the alternatives or next moves if the opponent enters the second line, that he ends up with down a piece, basically. Yeah? So you also use your common sense in those situations to not to waste your precious time. Then we saw the importance of creating several candidate moves to choose from on the very first move. That's a great time saver because you know, right? You have choices on the very first move. If one line goes too deep, too complex, you're wasting your time, it's good to take a step back occasionally and remind yourself that there are choices on the very first move. Maybe the other alternative will give you a much easier solution. And again, don't forget the blunder check process, folks. Calculation should always end with a proper blunder check, where you look at the opponent's forcing replies against your move, and you must make sure that the opponent doesn't defeat your move by a forcing move. And again, I want your feedback. Does this episode speak to you? Did you have similar problems when it comes to calculation? Do you want me to produce more videos on the same team? Some other teams perhaps? I'm very happy to respond to your comments, folks. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That's very important for me to keep on producing such content to help you improve your game. And for further information on this subject, please check my Chessable course, Fundamental Calculation Skills. That's exactly how you'll train in this broader search of candidates, but also positional mini plans. Thank you so much, folks. Bye.